Hello. Today's materials focus on the history of the LGBT community. I think that it's absolutely impossible to look at any community without having a feel for their history, having a feel for what they've experienced as a population, and how they've overcome the challenges that they have experienced, and also what challenges they're still experiencing, they're still fighting through. So today we start with, there's several videos. The first one is How We Got Gay. And again, it's a historical video that walks us through back when being gay was criminalized to today where same-sex marriage is legal. Similar to How We Got Gay, Being Gay, coming out in the 21st century, chronicles the experiences of sexual minorities from a time where being a sexual minority was criminalized to current day. I've included them both because I think it's important to hear as many stories and experiences as possible. I hope when you watch the videos that you not only appreciate the historical aspects and events that greatly impacted the sexual minority community, but also hear the stories of identity development by the people who are interviewed. While these videos don't do a great job of showing the intersectionality that existed for sexual minorities of color and or female sexual minorities, it's important to realize that race and gender played a significant role as well and still does. Look at the leaders who are interviewed, even today's leaders. Do you see diversity or do we see a lot of white men? A common theme that will emerge throughout this class is that in mainstream America, white men still hold a privileged status, even within the sexual minority community. While sexual minorities of color or women continue to yearn for equality and acceptance, even in today's age. There's another video called Before Stonewall, and it's not available free, so I didn't put it on the list, otherwise I would have. But one of the things that they talk about in that video that I thought really is striking for this class is that when all the leaders were getting together to strategize about how to fight for equal rights, that very much so the tenor of it was the men were there to do this, and the men felt that the women ought to be the ones that brought the cookies. And the same thing occurred with women of color, men of color, that they just never had that privilege that the white men do. Our next item is Capitalism and Gay Identity. So this article is written by a well-respected historian of sexual minority history. I love this article. And the reason that I love it is because it is the first piece of material that we get into that gives us a more in-depth conversation about sexual minority identities. However, I want to prepare you for the fact that the author uses some phrases that always set people off. For example, he says that gay men and lesbians have not always existed. Okay, so for some of you at this point, this is the time that you leave your chair, you say a few curse words, you pull out your gay history books so you can argue how wrong he is. But before you do that, let's sit down for a minute and remember, he's talking about identity, not about sexual acts. And we can talk about the Greeks all day long. But he's talking about the United States. He's talking about the experiences that sexual minorities had prior to the war and how they didn't exist because they were always hidden. They were never a part of. And also because the agrarian nature of our country at that time also led people to not have much expectation and much experience with what they were feeling, to understand what they were feeling, or to recognize that other people felt that way too. You know, the example that I would give you is, being a sibling. Um, if if my parents had a child, or even one of my parents had a child, and that child was put up for adoption or went someplace else, and I never knew that that child existed, I would not have an identity as a sister. However, in reality, I would be a sister because somewhere in the world I have a sibling. So it's thinking about it in those terms. And really what I want you to get out of this article is the historical perspective of what the war did and how it brought people together, but also how they were treated by the military and just in general. So I hope you enjoy it, and you'll have an opportunity to write about it if you want to dispute the author's perspective. The last two items for today are LGBTQ equality and state of pride. LGBTQ equality is a website that reviews the laws in various countries and states and rates them on whether they're supportive of sexual minorities or not. The importance of looking at the information on this website is that it helps people to understand that the legalization of same-sex marriage did not make sexual minorities equal. If you think back, it just didn't. And a lot of people believe that, oh, same-sex marriage is legal, so everything's fine, and the reality is that it's not. And we will not, as a group, until every element within the United States is provided to us in the same way that it is to heterosexuals, then we aren't equal, and that's all there is to it. So look at it. A lot of items that exist today that are a problem definitely are the ability to be fired because of your sexual orientation or gender identity, the ability to for adoption agencies to refuse to adopt a child out to a same-sex couple, things like that. And that becomes a dignity issue. It becomes a self-worth. It becomes a human rights issue. The other piece, the state of pride, if you think back to the first two videos, both of them had mini scenes from gay pride parades. And in the state of pride, the producer goes around to many different places and interviews people on the importance of the pride parades to them. One of the big things that, and you hear a lot and get to see a lot of information on just how important that pride is to individuals. But I also think it's really important and very telling to understand that this video was made in 2019. And so it really becomes, telling when you hear people in the video talking about how this is their city's 5th gay pride parade. 5th. That's right, 5. So that's something to look at and think about. And that tells you a lot, in my opinion, on the status of where we're at and what our country is accepting and what we aren't, and that some places are there, they've got it, but there's a lot of other places that aren't. After watching videos on the history of the LGBT community, it's very natural to think about, well, what's happening today and what's going on and how have things changed or how have they not changed. So I've included a video that was produced at the Kennedy Center, and it is from the Library of Congress, and it's a panel discussion by queer and trans individuals who represent various races and walks of life for certain, and I think that I recognize it's like another hour and a half, but there's a lot to be learned from it, and they're very candid in their responses and what they have to say. At the 35-minute mark of this video, Rebecca Kling and Lourdes Ashley Hunter do a great job of sharing with us the intersectionality that they face, and Dr. Hunter also, as the video goes on, really makes it clear about what life is like today, and particularly for the trans community. So I encourage you to watch this entire video. There's a lot to be shared, and it was produced in 2020, so it really is giving you a clear picture of what life is like today, and lets you do a lot of comparing and contrasting to the previous videos that talk about what happened in the past.